Welcome back. This is session 41. In the previous 40 sessions, we pretty much covered the opening paragraph of Dao De Jing, which in essence, I would recap here as all those universal laws cannot be reduced to rule the specifics, and those can be specifically described, defined, scoped, will stand to be corrected. But it does not matter whether it's heartfelt way of finding certain truth or scientifically, observed with the measurement, over the change course. Either way, they may appear on the surface of difference, but they're actually about the same. Why? Because they're both falling into the momentary and segmented truths. So when you elevate yourself to the higher level for the bigger view, what you would come to find, basically over a longer period of time to show the evolvement pattern and compared to the historical trend that you have either coming out of your own life experience, for people with a little more life experiences than the younger people, or for the younger who actually accumulated from all that reading so far. Either way, when you look at the big pictures, those choose discovery as you defined or not defined. They're just segmented truths, partial truths. They're not entire truths, the whole truths, right? So that was basically the opening paragraph. And I think the second paragraph, which we start to address, is a lot easier for most of us to relate to. Again, I will start, with Chinese on the first sentence of the second paragraph. The sentence says, and by the way, this is actually a longer sentence. Some people, break it up into two, but I think they're related, and so I collect them into one single sentence, a little longer. So anyway, that sentence says, 天下皆知美之为美，斯物异；皆知善之为善，斯不善异。So what does that mean? In English, once again, I'm here offering my own personal take, my own interpretation and translation here to, I guess, see if that makes sense to you. I can guarantee you when you Google online, there are all different kinds of interpretations. But anyway, mine is everyone knows what, pretty is, by his or her own, I guess, standard of what pretty, what beautiful is. But because you have this standard to judge, to be able to tell pretty from not so pretty, good looking from not so good looking, then there is, the other side, which is basically, like I just mentioned, not pretty, not good looking, probably even, somewhat ugly. And of course, that's not very pleasant, right? Unless you are constantly being complimented as the one that is good looking with all this charisma, if you're a guy, you're handsome, that, and if you're a lady or girl, you look so pretty. But of course, this is all in the eyes of beholders, like a piece of art. one person think it's pretty and the next does not think so. But nevertheless, there's still this, better looking than not so good looking. And of course, being judged, unless you're on the side that being complimented, actually meant that, of course, everybody would like to be flattered somehow, even though you don't admit, deep down you do like it. That's just something pleasant to hear, right? But then, what if the way you were born, your parent did not give you that gift, and you don't always have this appearance, so pleasing to everybody. It does not enlighten, people or brighten, people's day when they had a look at you. And some people even feel, sorry that they look at you. I'm just being harsh there, exaggerating. Of course, that doesn't happen. I'm just saying, imagine the person on the other side, rather than, enjoying the compliment, but actually feeling that look, that look. So that's about pretty or good looking or handsome, that. But then there's also the second half of that sentence says, people know what is, like being referred to as very good at, right? You're good at, let's say, I'm good at, art, right? But I'm not so good at a lot of other things. For instance, I'm not sure I can consider myself a handyman. But nevertheless, because you have this, what is, considered as good at, then the other side is you're not so good at. Well, that's not as, unpleasant as, being judged as not good looking, and really a lot more than not good looking, probably very bad looking. So you're not very good at it. But for a lot of, contemporary people who are used to this competitive situation, especially the Americans always have the term, the winners, the losers. In everything, there gotta be a winner and there gotta be a loser. And so you're either falling into the category of winner or a loser, right? How do you feel like being a loser? So anyway, good at something or not so good at something or really bad at something, well, people have their, I guess, dignity, if you will. Most people don't like to hear that. Hey, I can't believe you're so bad at this, man. Do you really want to hear that? So this is something, this Dao De Jing begin to touch on the comparative or the comparativeness, right? So everything is comparatively, coexisting. One exists only because there's another to compare to. So in the past 40 sessions, we addressed, about all the different, I guess, approach, of discovering truths. And that's all comparative too. And that, goes back to what is, I guess, considered the same difference, right? Because it's all competitive. So here, let's have some example here or analogy, right? So let's imagine that you went for a, let's say a kayak, right? In a group of 9, 12, 16, you pick the number. And you are way back, always lag, way behind in a long distance, and you're dragging the whole group, and people have to slow down just to make sure you're still in the group. And you try so hard, but your skill is basically just not there, right? and you feel so ashamed because you put the whole group at inconvenience. They were out here to have fun, but they have to slow down just for you, and you're not good at it. Of course, given time, your skill, you will pick up, right? Um, but hey, how do you feel? Of course, nobody would say anything nasty, about this. At least in my kayak club, people are super nice, right? Or at least that say something about the generation. I don't know about the young generation. I'm not going to bet mouse about the young generation, but anyway, in my kayak club, they're super, so super nice. But do I really like that situation? I always drag people, down, hold them back? Of course not. So eventually I quit that club. That is because I don't really always go out there, like them so frequently. But this kayak thing, if you do it, if for whole months you never did anything, when you go out there, it's quite a catch up for you to play. So anyway, I'm just giving you that example, right? As good, not so good at. And then let's give you another analogy, right? So I remember when I was in my probably middle school, and a classmate of mine, he just went to the junkyard and took back some this metal material from the scrap, and then he just made a boat out of it, and looks so good. It's a model. Of course, it's a dummy model. There was no like a motor or whatever. Remember, this was the harsh time of the middle of the Cultural Revolution. Everybody was equally poor, the entire nation. Nobody could afford anything. So anyway, it just looked good. Even if it's a model, a dummy model, just, put on the display anywhere, it just looked good, right? So I asked for some of the scrap materials, and my classmate was very generous, and he gave to me what I needed, and he even offered the tools, exactly what he used to make that. And I came home, I wanted to replicate, to be proud of myself. What? At the end of the process, it just did not turn out as good. In fact, it was really bad. So I was really depressed for a couple of days because, I didn't realize until then that I was really pretty bad when it comes to handy things. I guess when you're young, obviously you have egos, and that got hurt. So my dad, just so happened one day he was around, because most of the time he was locked away, by the whatever you call it, red guards or whatever. But on that day he was there, and he saw me, so depressed. He said, "What happened?" And I told him, I said, "Look, this, my classmate did a perfect job, and I didn't exactly copy him, but pretty much, I got the same material, same tools, except for I don't have the talents, and I turned out so bad. And I always thought I'm a great artist." So here's what my dad said. My dad said, "You know what, son? You might be good on something else, even though you're really bad on this." And he was being, really blunt. He told me I was bad. But that was the relationship. We never lie to each other or to ourselves. Always stay true to ourselves. So okay, so that was brutally blunt, but hey, I got the point. I didn't feel as bad anymore. Sure, I know I was better than my classmate on some, in something else. So hey, but here, I guess the real point is not about that. So what is about that? The point is, people created this, I guess, standard of perception, or even misperception, to judge things, judge other people, which, created this, probably pleasant, psychological effect on those receive the compliments, whereas those who did not get the compliments or actually was told, straight that, you know what, you're pretty bad at this. That, of course, would bright up the day for you, wouldn't it, huh? Of course, you're dying to know this truth, nothing but the truth about yourself. And you're so happy, finally you hear this, right? Of course, you're happy. um, but the point is, why do we even have to, right? Always have the winners and losers. Why can't we just, basically participate and get the, experience out of it? And regardless, good, bad, who cares, right? Is that possible? No, because that's the rule already said. In the human world, that's how it works. But this paragraph is really trying to point out the fact that everything is comparative. For instance, let's say, people have always, tell you, oh, you're so smart. Okay, comparing to what? Right? Comparing to who? Smart? Yeah, maybe. Smarter than who? And why does that even matter? Right? Or there are people, a lot of them actually, they always want to be richer, have so rich that they don't even want to, they don't want to, at least they don't know what they're going to do with their money, right? So that rich, that's their objective. And of course, compared to who? How rich is rich? You can never make enough money. Regardless who. I'm not going to name those top rich, fellows. But, hey, if you spend all your time in your life just trying to be rich, I think you probably miss a lot of things in your real life. But that's something totally deceiving, right? You want to be rich. What is rich? How rich is rich? Comparing to who? By what standard? That's a big rainbow to chase over there. And then people want to be famous. Of course, how famous is famous? To be recognized everywhere. And we all know a lot of the movie stars or whatever, or, people about to be movie stars, not even there yet. But then when they go out in the public, they wear the sunglasses. Very cool shades, man. What are you worried about? So you want to be so famous, and then you start to complain about, oh, I don't even have my privacy wherever I go. People just follow me, and they, so now you complain about it. Really? I guess it's just that all this is just saying you can live a lot happier if you don't have that harsh standards there. Okay? This will just be totally the opposite to the KPI system, which is basically try to measure your precise, progress, step by step, every node throughout the whole process. No, you want to be happy? Okay, just take your time, and don't be so harsh on yourself. I'm not so good. Yeah, I accept that. I'll live with that. I'm not so good. I already know that. But in the meantime, good by whose standard, right? Because I remember in China, in Japan, and in California, a lot of people say, oh, so-and-so is so successful. I never argue with people, but here, deep in my mind, what is successful? Successful, I believe, is when people achieve the objective specifically set. That's called success, right? So successful people, I would say, their objective, and they achieved that objective, and then you think they're successful. For me, that's justified, right? But you see people have a big house, okay, or a bunch of big houses, and an army of, expensive cars. That's successful? Maybe that's by somebody's standards, but it may or may not be the standard by the owner of those big houses and fancy cars, right? We don't know because, hey, uh, they never invited you. Presume that you want to be invited and get into that crowd and mingle with those people. But how do you know they're successful if you don't know their objective, right? So what we're talking about here is the standard to judge people. I mentioned that, I believe, a little earlier. In America, people start to realize not to ask people what you do because, hey, you sit here at a dining table, a banquet or a dinner party or some kind of event, and the person right next to you start a small talk. What do you do? I'm a lawyer. I'm actually working for one of the biggest law firm in America, specializing in maritime. Ooh, wow. Or, yeah, I'm a farmer. Oh, wow. You see, where does this conversation, lead to, right? That's a standard, right? Because you try to judge someone by the social standing achieved and then to label successful or not so successful, right? Okay. That, of course, is vanity, but most people still think that's something, is if they get there, it's a dream come true, right? Okay. But then, hey, we have other things too. I think I want to, even though we're talking Taoist teaching, I think I want to bring up one thing that I mentioned briefly before. When I was in high school, right? This was before I was reading Taoism. I read a very, I guess, a short novel, if you call it, by a German writer. I think I don't speak German, so I cannot pronounce really authentically in German accent, but in English is Henry Ball. Okay, so this guy, I read his one single short novel, and all his works pretty much stayed with me. Well, I cannot claim all, but a lot of them stayed with me. And this one specifically talking about one photographer, and it was early in the morning, sun was up, so he was out there at the Hamburg port, and he jumped onto a fishing boat and started taking pictures. And then when he's done with his photo taking, he looked back and he realized that there was someone sleeping in the boat. And then, of course, he apologized for being rude, woke up that person sleeping on the boat. And then they had a little conversation. So when the photographer realized that person sleeping on the boat was a fisherman, so he was kind of surprised that, oh, wow, I thought all the fishermen would go out there, very early. I don't know, some fishermen actually sleep this late. And the guy said, what's the rush? The fisherman said. Of course, I'm not reciting, I'm just based on my memory. And then the fisherman said, don't you have a big dream? And the fisherman's like, what dream would that be? This photographer first said, if you go out there, work harder and work more, you can a lot bigger harvest of those fish every time. The fisherman said, what for? What do you mean, what for? When you sell more and more fish, you get a bigger and bigger boat. And then the fisherman said, what do I need a bigger boat for? Well, when you have the bigger boat, you get even more fish, and then eventually you don't even have to do fishing anymore. You can just enjoy it yourself. And the fisherman said, okay, what do you think I'm doing right now? I'm enjoying myself with the time I have. And the photographer did not say anything because he thought about it. It made absolutely sense. Now, this is exactly what I can relate to Taoism teaching because, hey, you don't have to live your life to make other people envy so that you can satisfy your own little ego, right? You can enjoy yourself like that fisherman. I personally, sleeping is not my I guess hobby. I do other things, but still, basically, if you take the time you still have, before you go like, you can enjoy a lot of things. You don't necessarily need money to be happy. Of course, you need to be able to feed yourself and your family, but that's it, right? So why do we need to basically live up to the standards set by others for you? You don't need to, right? So I know that, a photographer goes out there, basically try to capture the moment, not necessarily thinking about the money. But a fisherman, when you do this for a living, I don't think you can call that a hobby, you know? When you have to do something to make a living, that take all the fun out of it, right? Because I don't have to sell my arts to make a living, but I do have to, get contract, on the supply chain management stuff over, upstream sector of oil, gas, and chemical industry to make my living, right? Is that fun? Not really. I prefer to do, basically my arts or, poetry or simply just, sit by my koi pond and sipping my tea and all that. Or, take a bicycle ride in the neighborhood or, rowboat, on the lake. That's all fun. I mean, can you tell me that it's really so much fun when you have to measure that fun by how much money you make per contract? Not for me, no. So anyway, in this session, we're really just talking about the standards set by others for you, and you live your life to satisfy other people by meeting that standard. At least you die trying, right? Is that fun? Think about it.